Being home alone at night feels safe until the silence breaks. Tonight, you'll hear 3 real stories from people who swear they'll never look at the dark the same way again. If you think being alone is safe, these stories might change your mind. I live in a small rental house in rural Oregon. My boyfriend works night shifts, so more often than not, I'm left alone at night. I don't usually mind. The house is small, cozy, and I've always considered myself independent. But there's one night I'll never forget, the night I realized how vulnerable you really are when you're alone. It was early autumn, and the nights were already cold. I had just finished washing the dishes when I noticed how quiet everything was. No cars passing by, no neighbors' dogs barking, not even the hum of crickets. Just silence, the kind that makes you suddenly aware of your own breathing. I tried to shake it off, made myself some tea, and curled up on the couch to watch a show. Around midnight, I decided to head to bed. I remember locking the front door, double-checking the back door, and making sure the windows were closed. I was always careful about that. Sometime later, maybe an hour or so after I had drifted off, I woke up to a sound. A distinct, deliberate sound. It came from my bedroom window. At first, I thought I was dreaming, so I held my breath and listened. Then again, 3 slow knocks against the glass. My heart started racing so hard it drowned out everything else. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. My blinds were drawn, but the thought of someone standing just on the other side, inches from where I slept, made me feel sick. I reached for my phone on the nightstand and checked the time. 2:37 a.m. I wanted to call someone, but who? The police? What if it was nothing? But then, again, this time slower, like they knew I was listening. I finally slid off the bed, as quietly as possible, and crept toward the hallway. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like thunder. I didn't dare peek through the blinds. I just wanted to put distance between myself and that window. I hid in the bathroom, sitting on the floor with the door locked, phone in my shaking hands. I dialed my boyfriend first, but it went straight to voicemail. I thought about calling the police, but I hesitated, terrified of making it worse somehow. After a few minutes of silence, I convinced myself it had to be a prank, maybe a branch tapping in the wind. I slowly stood up, turned off the bathroom light, and cracked the door open to listen. Nothing. Dead silence again. I gathered what courage I had and tiptoed back toward the bedroom, phone flashlight in hand. When I reached the doorway, I froze. The blinds over the window, the same window where I had heard the knocking, were slightly parted. I know for a fact I closed them fully before bed. That was enough for me. I grabbed my keys, wallet, and ran barefoot out the front door. I sat in my car in the driveway, locked all the doors, and stayed there until sunrise. When daylight finally came, I forced myself to check the window. The glass was smudged, not with dirt, but with a faint impression of fingerprints pressed into the pane from the outside. I never saw anyone that night. I still don't know if it was a stalker, a stranger passing through, or something else entirely. But one thing's for sure, when you're alone at night, sometimes even your locked doors and closed blinds can't keep the outside world from reaching in. I've always been a night owl. Back in 2017, I was living alone in a small rental house on the outskirts of Salem, Oregon. The neighborhood was quiet, maybe too quiet. At night, the only sounds I'd ever hear were the occasional passing car or the distant barking of a dog. I usually stayed up late reading or watching something on my laptop, and I liked the solitude until one night when it stopped feeling like solitude at all. It was around 1:30 a.m. when I decided to grab a glass of water. As I walked into the kitchen, I noticed something unusual. The porch light outside was on. I never left it on because I was careful about saving electricity. My first thought was that maybe I had accidentally flipped the switch earlier in the day. But when I approached the window, my stomach dropped. There was a man standing in my yard. He was tall, thin, dressed in a hoodie pulled low over his face. He wasn't moving, just standing there, about 20 feet away from my back door, facing the house as if he had been watching me. I froze, gripping the edge of the counter, my heart pounding so hard I thought he might hear it. I slowly stepped back, trying not to make any sound. My phone was charging in the living room, and I debated whether to risk running to get it. But before I could move, the man tilted his head slightly to the side, as if he'd noticed something. Then, without warning, he started walking straight toward my back door. I bolted to the living room, snatched my phone, and dialed 911 with trembling hands. I whispered to the operator that someone was in my yard, coming toward my door. She told me to stay on the line and lock myself in a room if possible. I rushed into my bedroom, locked the door, and crouched by the window, peeking out through the blinds. That's when I saw him. He was on my porch now, standing right in front of the back door. He reached for the handle and twisted it slowly, as though testing if it was locked. I could hear the faint rattle of the doorknob echoing through the house. The operator stayed calm, assuring me police were on their way. But every second felt like an hour. I heard the man jiggle the handle again, harder this time, and then the sound of him pressing his palms against the glass as if he was trying to see inside. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't notice the faint glow of my phone screen. Then silence. For a few moments, I thought maybe he'd given up. But suddenly, there was a loud bang. He had slammed his fist against the glass. I screamed and backed away from the window. The operator's voice in my ear urged me to stay calm. Help was close. I heard footsteps retreating across the porch, then silence again. The next sound I heard was the wail of police sirens approaching. When the officers arrived, they searched the yard and surrounding streets, but found no sign of the man. The only thing they noticed was a smear on the glass of my back door, like an oily handprint left behind. To this day, I don't know who he was or what he wanted. The police told me he was likely testing homes in the area to see if anyone was awake or if doors were unlocked. But the thought that he had chosen my house that night, and that I had been awake to witness it, still keeps me up sometimes. Being alone at night used to feel peaceful. Now, every creak of the house makes me wonder if someone is out there, standing in the dark, watching. I used to live in a small rental house just outside Eugene, Oregon. It wasn't in the middle of nowhere, but it was tucked far enough back from the main road that at night, it felt like complete isolation. I was 24 at the time, working late shifts at a cafe. Most nights, I got home around 11:30 p.m., sometimes closer to midnight. One night in October, it was raining hard. The kind of steady, cold rain that makes everything outside seem muffled. I remember parking my car, jogging up to the porch, and feeling this weird heaviness in the air. I shook it off. Just a long day, I told myself. Inside, the house felt unusually quiet. I always left a small lamp on in the living room, so it wasn't pitch black, but the silence was thick. After changing into sweats, I made some tea and curled up on the couch with my laptop. Around midnight, while the rain tapped against the windows, I thought I heard something faint, a low thump. At first, I assumed it was just the storm, maybe a branch hitting the siding. But then I heard it again. This time, it wasn't random. It sounded like footsteps, slow, deliberate, on the wooden deck outside my front door. I froze. My eyes went straight to the door, which was only a few feet from the couch. The porch light was off, so all I could see through the small window in the door was blackness. My heart started racing. I muted my laptop and held my breath. The sound came again. 1, 2, 3 heavy steps. Someone was definitely out there. I grabbed my phone and dialed my best friend, whispering as soon as she answered. I told her someone was on my porch. She went quiet, then told me to call the police. I didn't want to overreact, but the footsteps didn't stop. Whoever it was wasn't leaving. Instead, I heard the doorknob jiggle, very slowly, like they were testing to see if it was locked. I nearly dropped my phone. My friend kept whispering frantically, "Call 911 right now." I moved as quietly as I could toward the kitchen, away from the door, and dialed emergency services. My voice was shaking as I told the dispatcher that someone was trying to get into my house. She told me to stay on the line and hide somewhere safe. I crouched behind the kitchen island, holding the phone to my chest, listening. The person outside kept twisting the knob. Then came a knock, not a normal knock, 3 slow, heavy bangs that made the door rattle. The dispatcher said officers were on the way. Minutes stretched like hours. I kept waiting to hear the door break open, but instead, after what felt like forever, the noises stopped. No footsteps, no knocking, nothing. When the police finally arrived, they searched the property but found no one. The mud on the porch showed clear boot prints leading up to the door, but none leading back into the yard. They just ended at my porch. The officers told me it could have been someone passing through, maybe looking for a place to hide from the rain. But I couldn't shake how deliberate the noises had been. Those slow steps, the way the handle turned, the knocking, it wasn't someone desperate for shelter. It felt like someone playing with me, seeing how far they could push before I broke. I didn't sleep that night. Honestly, I barely slept for weeks afterward. Every time the rain fell against the windows, I remembered those footsteps on my porch and the feeling of being completely, terrifyingly alone. If you made it this far, maybe you belong here. Subscribe to WhisperCage. More true horror is waiting.